you for coming out here. I really appreciate you coming out. It's been 14, 15 months, I think, since we actually chit-chatted and hung out since pre-pandemic, man. And, you know, you're looking good, man. You've really taken care of yourself. And, you know, you've been somebody that I enjoy talking to a lot, but we haven't had time to just because of what's been happening the last year and a half or so. So it's good to see you, and thank you for coming out and doing this. Man, so one thing I wanted to ask you right off the back was, how have you been dealing with this whole pandemic thing? Because you've been cooped up at home, I think, the entire time, and you've been in a job where you're pretty much your whole life you had to go work in a big tower in the city, and now you were at home. How's that transition been for you?
Well, first, Mike, thanks for having me on. It's good to see you. It's been a while. So like you said, it's nice to see friendly faces. It's nice to have an opportunity to talk to you. You're right. It's the last few years I've spent most of my time working in the big towers in San Francisco, and it's been nice. And the transition has been a lot better for me than most people, I would say. I've had the opportunity to work from home before, but not to this degree. So it's been pretty good. I've had the opportunity to have more time to myself without having to feel like I need to be going out doing things, because I'm actually working at home. So it's been good. A little bit different for others, though.
I bet. I mean, so just since you have that experience ahead of time of actually working from home before, now you're doing it full time. Like, have you been getting sort of that, not island fever, but that sort of, what do you call it? God, I can't think of the word now with the C, claustrophobic effect, where I'm just literally stuck in this place the whole time now.
I think a lot of people probably had that at one point, and maybe sooner than others. So back in March of 2020, that was the beginning of all this. Probably by June or July, I think a lot of people started to feel that claustrophobia. I think for me, it was actually very natural. I'm a little bit of an introvert at times, so not having to go out and trying to be social outside of work was actually kind of relieving for me. So I had the same kind of claustrophobia I think that most people had, but it kind of wore off and I kind of got used to it. So it was actually probably better for me than most.
Well, that's good, because so many people were still struggling with trying to figure out how to deal with that now, with the new way that we're just working, or how most people who used to have office jobs are now having to figure out how to do that at home. Some people have figured it out by saying, I'm going to work from home the full time, and I'll just go buy a house somewhere else where it's cheaper, and I could put my kids into a better school and give them a better life, and more power to them. But now that everything's sort of opened up, keep our fingers crossed it stays that way. You got any trips coming up? Any plans?
Yeah, actually, I might. I think you remember at one point we were all talking about going to Thailand.
We did, yeah.
And of course, that fell right during the pandemic. So
right at it.
That didn't happen. But I'm actually looking at maybe going to do that at the end of this year. So it might turn into a Thailand, Southeast Asia trip. We'll see. Still planning. It's still in the planning stages. And you're welcome. You're invited.
All right, I'm booking it. I've never been there, so that'd be an exciting time. We just came back from Hawaii, and as you can tell, I haven't shaved yet, and I'm pretty tanned, and it was nice to get out of the city, nice to get back into vacation, nice to get into getting a week off from everything that we normally have to go through. But, you know, as exciting as it was, that's my third time being there, and I kind of started to see, you know, another side of island life, or another side of what people who live there normally go through. And, you know, when you go there for the first time, you really just are so enthralled with the beaches and the touristy thing.
You're just a tourist.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're just out there to have fun, and you just see only the good things, and you want to get away from what it is that you probably have to go through in your own life at home. But I started looking at how, like, some of the islanders live, and, you know, it's amazing how, for what you would think would be a paradise to live in, it's actually, for some, not all people, it can be challenging, because, you know, I was talking to a couple people, and it's like, as great as the islands are, it's limited what you can actually do.
Yeah.
Like the idea of having a 6-figure career and doing all these different things, it just doesn't exist there the same way. It's a different way of living. And it kind of puts into perspective on how we kind of live our lives here, because over here, living on the mainland, we have all these opportunities. Where we're at, we have all the corporate companies, all the tech jobs, and we know nothing else because that's just the environment that we're raised in. But over there, it's a very simple lifestyle, and some people love it, enjoy it, and some people are going crazy and
Right.
don't really know how to get out of that how to get out from that environment and see what else is out there.
Right. We take for granted a lot of freedoms that we have out here. We can go 30 miles this way, 30 miles that way, north, south, east, or west. Excuse me. And we don't think twice about that. But yeah, island life is a lot different. You're confined to what's available, right? And resources is a big thing too. And I mention this because back to your prior topic was, as people are transitioning out of working from home, there's still the talk about perhaps some people living outside of where they are and then being able to continue to have the same job.
Mm-hmm.
My joke was with people was, go buy a place in Hawaii and work remotely there. Who wouldn't want to live in paradise and work there? And that brings up what you're talking about. It's not always, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So I hear exactly what you're saying.
I know, and it's sort of a transition to putting it that way. The grass is not always greener on the other side, and when we kind of think about what happens over here, like it's so easy to get caught up in the big careers, the big paydays, and then you can sometimes get hindered by that. What some other people think would be a great thing to have. I was talking to some guy not too long ago, and he lives in this area, but he has a job that he's not very happy with, but he gets paid really well, benefits, opportunities, all that good stuff that you think you'd want. But because of the cost of living of here, he can't afford to buy a home here. So he said, what, I'm going to go buy a home out in the valley. I can buy a nice size house, which he could, but property, I'm thinking about my kid's future, my wife, and overall happiness. But there's no jobs out there that pay me what my company's paying me over here. So I have to commute basically 2 to 3 hours, and I can't do it every day. So I got to stay at my in-laws during the work week and then go home for the weekends. And he's like, I did it for a while thinking that it would just work itself out, but it hasn't. And it's I'm trying to go, he's telling me he's trying to go find a job close to where he lives, and thought he had an opportunity, and it's just, they can't pay him as well as he can over here. He's like, dude, I got the golden handshake. I can't leave. I am kind of stuck here. And, you would think with having the salaries that, I have in my company that I would be okay. But it's like,
no, it's not. It really isn't, especially in San Francisco and the surrounding counties. It's really because at one point I started to look up what the cost of living was, what the median salary is, and what you really needed to survive. And what you would make here, you would think that's a lot of money. If you made the money that you make here and live somewhere else, maybe in the Midwest or elsewhere, that's really, really good money. But here, a 6-figure salary is just getting started. It's not even, and that sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of the problem, that you have to make that much. And most jobs, you don't make that much. You don't start anywhere near what the actual cost of living is, what the actual minimum wage you need. It's not even realistic.
It's not. I was telling somebody, I forgot if I told one of my guests this, but imagine like a single family home, like built in 1970. Those old school track homes with the lawn and whatever, like we all kind of grew up in.
Exactly.
If you wanted that kind of home anywhere around here, and you wanted to have a family, maybe 2 kids, 2 cars, a dog, and be close to work. With the cost of living now, your household annual income to live comfortably, thinking about children's colleges and savings and investments and all that good stuff, probably about $300K.
At least.
Just for like that old 1970s home that probably needs a lot of work.
Right.
Just to sort of say I have a home that I bought and I have, the wife, 2 kids, or husband, 2 kids, 2 cars, and I live close enough to work. That's where we're at now.
That's the minimum. And you're absolutely right, because if you really think about it, first of all, households now, you have to have a dual income. So if each member of the household earned a wage, you'd want it to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 125. That, because you were saying about 300, I'd probably say about 250, you might be able to get away with that, but that's 125 per household member. And that's just getting started. That's barely being able to save for a college fund. That's barely being able to save for additional renovations that you will want on the home, or whatever the case may be. It's just ridiculous how expensive it is. And a lot of people really don't think about that. So you've got a lot of out-of-towners that come in and they've got great jobs and they're making all this money and they're not saving. And by the time they realize they should have been saving, they're probably about 5 years to 8 years behind. And you're like, what am I doing here? So you get a lot of, we see a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
Being native Bay Area folks, you see a lot of people come in and they're like, this is great. Thanks for the great time, San Francisco, but I got to go because I can't live like this. It's not sustainable.
It's crazy because we all have these expectations, not all of us, but some of us have expectations that, whether it's from your parents, society, or yourself, that by the time I'm 25 to 30, I should be, settling down and getting my life started the way that my parents did because it worked for them. So why shouldn't it work for me? And because of everything that's been created since then, it's just a different life path for most people nowadays than, us growing up. Right. I had a similar pressure, not exactly the same. I didn't really have the pressure from my parents to say, by the time you're X age, you should be married with kids and a home and all that good stuff. But it was still we saw how hard life was for us. We want you to make sure that you have a life that you're happy with, that you're comfortable with, whatever that entails. You do what you got to do. Right. No pressure no pressure on us to have to hit a certain threshold. But a lot of people I know, they didn't have that. They had the opposite growing up. It was, you're expected to go get that degree. You're expected to, buy a home. You're expected to get married by this time. You're expected to all these other things. And I can't blame that generation for saying that because that's what their parents did and it worked. That's what they did and it worked. It's a different ballgame that we're playing now. Like, I meant to ask you one time, I don't think I ever did, but what was the sense that you got from your parents and family and how you grew up about what your life should look like or what's supposed to come down the pipeline for you?
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds all too familiar, especially, coming from an ethnic family. There's certain expectations that are carried on from generation to generation. Being first generation American born, Chinese, there was a lot of the old ways, if you will, that were brought, but my parents did a really good job of kind of re-innovating themselves and having a really good mix of the old culture and the new culture. So a lot of the things that they expected were what you would, see on TVs and movies and stuff like that. They wanted you to have a good education. They wanted you to do good in school. They wanted you to be successful and happy, have a family. I've managed to mess all that up. I'm the only one. The siblings that I have that they're doing a little bit better in terms of those expectations. But my parents, luckily for me, my parents were really, I don't want to say they embraced the Western lifestyle, but a lot of it, they grew as I grew. So it was actually really nice to be able to have that culture, even though I don't speak a lick of Chinese. And don't know nearly enough of my heritage as I should. It was always nice to have that background, have that to fall back on. And, I grew up with a large family. So my my uncles and aunts all live out here, so was able to spend a lot of time out here and have that. But it was also really nice to be able to kind of have that, the Western expectations, if you will. So there wasn't a lot of pressure for me to do those things. But oddly enough, while they didn't pressure me, as you grow up and you become an adult and you're trying to find out who you are, you know, a lot of the things that your parents were, you end up kind of being. I still get this a lot where my brothers are all like, you ended up just like that and you said you never would. I'm like, well, yeah. I would have argued with that 10 years ago, but now, you know, it is what it is. So the expectations I find now are mostly my own. And I think with age comes a certain amount of wisdom, I would hope. And trying to use that to, you know, navigate my way through, you know, what's left.
Jeez. It's funny how you mentioned how they've all told you become your father. Like, I never will. Oh, I guess I did. That's what I've been told too. Like, I never thought I would become my father. I'm like, oh wow, I actually, all those little things you thought you would never do, you end up doing the same thing. So I can see where you come from with that one. So like when we're talking about the expectations, do you think that comes from fear that if you don't do what the predecessors have done, you will not survive? Do you think it comes from, we need you to do it because back in the day, there was no retirement system. So your retirement system was your kids. So if you don't have kids, who's going to take care of you and vice versa? Or is that just some sort of, well, do it because I say so, therefore do it kind of a thing?
I think growing up, it was the latter. You did it because that's what they told you to do. And they told you to do that because that's what they were told to do. So it carries on. But moving further away from that as we get older and older in our adulthood, I think I just come to realize that a lot of the things that they were expecting were the things that you kind of came to the conclusion on your own, right? So after a certain amount of time, like I said, hopefully that experience and knowledge turns into wisdom and you use that properly. So I would like to think that as time progressed, I made the same decisions that the same decisions I came to are pretty similar to the ones that my parents and others would have wanted me to do. So, when it comes to retirement and all those things, you kind of work towards that. I think I'm a little bit late in regards to that, but better late than never, I guess.
I guess, the way things are going, and it's like everybody always says like 20 is a new 30 and whatnot. It's kind of like, I don't really think you get set on your path for most of us until we're probably closer to 30 something. It used to be once you graduated high school back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it was. Now you're an adult, now go do the whole shebang. And then it became, okay, after college, which is like 24, 25-ish, whatever. Okay, now you're an adult, go up and do your thing. And now, just because of how much everything costs, tuition and everything, it's like, okay, now you're 30 and you just accomplished what you think you need to. Now your life begins now.
Right.
Now you learn how to go out and live on your own. Now you go out and learn how to save up your own money and do your own investments. And retiring, maybe our grandparents retired at 50, but it's like,
good luck.
Yeah, even if you could retire now, it's like you still plan to work or do something. There is no sitting on the bench or sitting on the porch and rocking the back and forth in your chair and letting the days pass you by, which is something that I wouldn't want to do anyway. I've seen people who have grandparents who all the grandparents do is sit in front of the TV all day. And, they're happy when you come over as the grandchild, say hi. And then if you bring your kids, they play with them a little bit. But then once you leave, they're back to sitting in front of the TV watching whatever.
Right.
And then you kind of see them waste away that way. Then you see examples of people who are same age or older who are just out there active. They're traveling, they're working out, they're being productive, and they just look a lot more youthful. So it's kind of one of those things where I don't want to be put in a position where if I retire, then I'm not doing anything. Because then that's probably going to be where I would end up, is just sitting in front of the TV all day doing whatever. You want to provide for your financial future, and I get that part, and I'm definitely doing that, but I got to be active.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people in our generation have a lot of that in mind, and they've self-actualized to the point where they will get to that. And also, our generation has been fortunate in the fact that we have a lot of things that our parents' generation didn't have. So we do get to start a little bit later. The things that our parents did when in their 20s, in their early 20s and mid 20s, a lot of people now doing in their 30s. But that's actually okay because it's kind of set up much better that way. Like a lot of people now, they'll finish college and then some will go home or live close to home and not really be able to jump right into a career. My father was in a job when he actually went back. His job paid him for it to finish his degree. So right from jump, 22, 23, 24, whatever it was, you go. But now it's different. We finish a lot later. We start later. The gap year between high school and college, maybe a gap 2 year, so there's a lot of things that change. So I think we're finding that there's a lot more conveniences as we progress. And what we're doing now is different from what our parents did and definitely different from the ages. Like what I'm doing now is totally different from what my parents did. But you also have the opportunity to live a lot more life. So when it's time for us to retire, we don't envision ourselves like, all right, I'm just going to settle down. I've got a few years before I kick the can down the road. Now it's just like, this is the second half. Let's live it. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people, like I look forward to retirement at this point. I'm much closer to retirement now than when I was. I have more years behind me than I do ahead of me. So I think about that all the time. And yeah, when I retire, I hope to be in a position where I can travel a lot more because I didn't do any traveling when I was younger. I would love to travel a lot more. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
That's so crazy how, you want to travel more when you're younger, but you don't have most of us don't have the financial means unless daddy pays for everything. It's like we got to go out and work. And then when we've worked those 20, 30 years, whatever it is, for the average person, now we have the funds so we can go out and do that. But sometimes we don't have the energy to go out and do like the really crazy stuff that we used to. But it's something that, I do think about too, about the future of that too. What do you think has been kind of transitioning to how we said that we have it better than our parents in certain ways? In some ways you could say they had it better. What do you think has been the biggest challenge with the young people now? More specifically, like the people who are like 17 to 25, and that really, those years where we're really so confused because everything happens at the same time and we're like, we don't know what to do. We just go with the flow.
It's funny. I actually have a nephew that's 17, and then I have another nephew that's 20. He's in college. I think the biggest difference now is just the sheer amount of knowledge that is at young people's fingertips, right? Social media, the internet, all that stuff. But it really is to say that they actually know a lot more. They're much more woke, if you will.
That word, yeah.
Yeah, it's annoying. It's annoying. But at the same time, I think what happens with the younger generation now is they know a lot, so they expect a lot. So they're doing a lot more at the age of 17, 18. I mean, at 17, 18, I was putzing around. I'm just lucky I'm alive today because of the decisions I made then. Looking back, there's no guarantee that I should even be here. And I think a lot of people feel that way. But with the younger generation, I think they know a lot, so they expect a lot. But by the same token, I think one of the greatest challenges is opportunity as well. Everyone wants the same opportunity now. Everyone wants to go to college or have that, higher education and have that good paying job as though that's the only way to get there. And that's not. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of opportunities outside of the traditional college education route. And what I see a lot is there's a lot of people that are going to college. They get the degree and have no idea what to do with it. And they're looking for jobs and they're expecting, I've done all the things that you told me I'm supposed to do at a young age. So the next thing is I'm supposed to get a job and you're supposed to give it to me. But you're not really doing anything to earn that job. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Once you get that education or whatever it is, that's the threshold. That's the minimum threshold. Now you've got to earn it. And the problem now is a lot of the younger generation think I've done what I've been told to do, so I should be able to get those things. And it's not. You have to earn it. That's not earning it. So I think that's the greatest challenge for a lot of the younger people that I'm in contact with. It's they know what they want, but the opportunities, it's challenging.
It's I think that's something that society as a whole really dropped the ball on, is that we kept telling everybody, they told us in our generation too, it's you got to have a college degree, otherwise you won't get the good jobs. And the idea behind it was that if we have more people educated, we'd have more people in prosperity, people who come from, maybe they're single children who grew up in a family in a rural part of North Dakota, whatever, and they're going to be the first ones of their family to go out and make a good money with a good education. But then we end up saturating the job market with so many talented people, and there's just not enough to go around. So we talk a lot about the relatively few success stories of people who, let's say they get a degree from, I don't know, Columbia University, and then Google hires them, they come out here making $150,000 straight out of college. You hear about that, but you hear that so many times because it's a good story, but then it becomes the expectation that, well, if that person did it and I went to the same school, therefore I should get the same thing. Right. And unlike, or less likely than our generation, where we kind of knew we still had to work at it because we still had parents at that age who were still blue collar. There was so many blue collar jobs back when we were kids that was still, it was still a respectable thing to be able to be a mechanic for your whole career, or be an auto plant worker, or working in some sort of factory. But as those jobs went away and became automized, it was, right. Now there's better paying jobs that are behind the desk in a computer. But now we expect it, but there's fewer of those numbers wise than there was for our parents.
Exactly. It was almost like a fallback. You could always, if you couldn't go to a whole college and education route, you could always fall back on some of these other jobs, these blue collar jobs. They don't exist anymore. They do in a way, but the problem is also nobody wants them. A lot of people are saying, well, I want a job. And, I just can't find one. No, you want the job you want, and you can't find that, and that's difficult. And it's also difficult, the cost of education is some people a lot of people don't realize, they'll go into debt, $120,000 or even more. I mean, some people pay that much for a home. And to get a home loan, that's a 30-year jumbo loan. So you got to put those things into perspective. A lot of people who are doing those kinds of things have no idea what they want to do. They're just expecting things to work itself out. It's not going to work itself out. You have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, I think the greatest thing is a lot of people just don't realize it's a dog-eat-dog world. So you have to find ways to survive. And, some of us are coddled, especially the middle class. We're able to kind of if we can't find it, we move home. We have that luxury. A lot of people don't have that luxury. And quite frankly, those are the people who succeed, because there's nothing to fall back on. They make it or they die.
I always want to know, was it dog eat dog or dog eat dog?
Dog eat dog.
Is that what it is? It's one of those things you hear so much you never actually pay attention. What is that supposed to mean? The other thing is that cost of education now. I went to college and, granted, I did 2 years at community college where each class was like $20, it seems, whatever it was.
I did the same thing.
See, nothing wrong with that.
No, I encourage people to do that.
Yeah. And then even with my 2 years, and I'm lucky I had a godmother that, pretty much helped me out most of the way. And I had a father who worked 2 jobs to help me pay for books. So right. I'm forever indebted to that I was able to graduate with no college debt. But even if I did, at that point, it would have been maybe $10,000,
right,
maybe.
Right.
That same education now, $50,000 starting.
Right.
I got a buddy now who's got a wife who's, I think, a nurse practitioner. They make good money.
Right.
I think she's in her mid-40s, $300K in debt.
Right.
What do you do with that? I mean,
yeah. In certain areas of the nation, that's a home. $300,000. That's a lot of money, and it's tough. It's really hard. And that's kind of my point. I think a lot of people, their parents don't plan out enough where there's no college fund for those kids. So those kids do what they can. And they have in their mind, all right, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do the best thing I can for myself, but I have no money. So I'm going to get all these different loans. I'll get grants, but I'll get loans. And they're not thinking about the now. They're thinking about the future. It should be able to pay for itself. But nowadays, it really doesn't. Even high-paying jobs here in the San Francisco Bay Area, that's enough for you to live. That's not enough for you to save. Like a lot of people who would make six figures, $100,000, $110,000, that will barely get you cost of living expenses here in the city, especially when rent is going to be anywhere from 30 to 40% of your income. So it's tough.
And people wonder why I don't have kids. It's like, I see the numbers. It's like, oh man, even though I know that's not the way I'm supposed to look at it.
Kids are expensive.
They are expensive. And by all means, I'm not knocking anybody who has kids. They can be the greatest. They are the greatest thing in the world. And to be able to raise somebody and mold them into your own, that's a great thing to have. And, I'm definitely happy for everybody that I know who has them and is able to actually devote the time needed to make sure that they grow up successful. At least give them the best opportunity to succeed as they can. And I've just noticed that a lot more people are, especially around these more prosperous areas, the SF Bay Area, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, obviously. We're getting married later and later, and some of us are more on the bandwagon of, even though I would like kids, there's just no way I can afford them. I live here where the jobs are at. My parents live in Oregon or something like that. I'd have to pay for a babysitter. I'd have to, you start going through the numbers, and it's like,
right.
How are you going to do this? And it's more along the lines of, it used to be when we were growing up, we would probably hear more people saying, so when you get married, when you having kids, when
right.
you going to tie the knot, join the club, if you will. You hear less and less of that now because more people are like, that. I get how that's not easy to just jump into anymore, like it would have been for our parents, when even some people, like we know people where you can live at home at 30 or 40 and the grandparents like, stay here, we'll take care of the kids.
Right.
That's great for financial reasons, like,
right,
and babysitting reasons too. But
absolutely,
most people don't have that luxury.
No, I was going to say, I think our generation is probably going to be the last generation that you'll see that kind of falls into the traditional, I'm going to get old enough, find a partner, get married, have kids. A lot of it's fluid now. You're going to see a lot of different ideas of what constitutes a family. You're going to see a lot more single parentage. And just like from my nephews, like I told you, they're younger. None of them, and younger people as well that I know, none of them are in any rush to do any of the things that we did when we were around the same age at all. So it's just going to be totally different.
It's different now, just seeing how kids are raised, and no fault of many parents. They're so busy. It's like I kind of have to have my child. I hate to say the word raised, but occupied by like an iPad, because I need to go work on the computer at home. I need little Joey to be occupied with this, what is it, birds or Angry Birds or something like that.
Right.
You can't knock him for it. I mean, it does keep the kids occupied. It does educate. But I've noticed more as time has gone on, social skills in younger people has just been, I won't say tanking, but it's nowhere like, it was difficult for us to figure out how to talk to people and all that stuff. Now it's like, sometimes it's like talking to a wall with these kids. No fault of their own, though. I can't blame the parents who are both working and busy that, little Sally Sue now doesn't know how to talk to her boss or to her coworkers. It's all social media stuff now, and face-to-face stuff just isn't what it used to be.
Right.
I cannot blame the parents, but at the same time, what are we sort of seeing as we go down the road with that?
Well, I think also as just civilization as a whole, socialization has completely changed, and it's not going to go back to what it was before. It's very, very different. You've got a lot of younger folks that just aren't interested in the things that we were. Say, for instance, you're talking about the socialization. They have a hard time talking to one another. Not only that, I remember at 17, 18, constantly interested in meeting someone that you would have a intimate relationship with, right? Again, my nephew's no interest in that whatsoever. I'm like, you're 17, you're 18. Well, how are you not interested in doing those kinds of things? And it's just totally different. So if you've got that mindset as you're entering into early adulthood, everything else changes after that. You're not looking to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner of any sort. You're not looking to, end up living together and doing all those things. You're just living. So all the things that we're talking about, the things that I would like to do as I retire, they're doing these things now. So it just changes the whole dynamic of what's happening. But also the socialization. People are unable to talk to one another. Just the simple niceties.
Face to face, yeah. I mean, I was thinking the other day about bullying when we were in high school age. It used to be that, I'm going to say you accepted it because you don't want to accept that, but it was something that a lot of us dealt with at some point, maybe not to the extreme as others, but for bullying, at least with boys and guys, it was face-to-face stuff. You say something to me and you push me around the locker room. If I don't respond back to you, then I'm kind of seen as a punk or that I'm a pushover. And sometimes guys feel like they're pushed in a corner where you have to respond and take the risk of getting expelled or suspended because you got to stand up to the bully, which your dad behind the scenes would be like, I'm proud of you. But at face-to-face, It's like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing those sorts of things. But in a way, it teaches you how to handle conflict because you're going to see a lot more of that when you go in the work world. Maybe not physical fighting, but people trying to take advantage of you, people trying to get what they can out of you without giving a lot to you. It's and like with girls, it was always, you would hear them talk about each other behind their back, but it was always confined to like the little groups. Now they create profiles on social media, like ghost profiles to talk smack about somebody.
Right.
And I've seen that a lot in what I do for a living about just the teen mental health stuff, like where this is all coming from, the other side of social media that we got to deal with.
Right.
It's, I've also seen it like with, I guess you would call it how different people think. What used to be sort of how guys think, and here's how we do things, and here's how women think, here's how they do things. And then when you get married, you sort of work together to create a family or create a future. I've seen it being an issue there where, I see a lot of young men who grow up and they, through no fault of their own, no fault of their parents, this is just kind of how we're learning how to deal with things. I've seen people or young guys who just don't know how to, I even give a handshake. Like their version of a handshake is like this thing where there's no confidence in it. It's like, here's my hand, shake it. It's like, you don't realize the body language that's giving off.
I don't even know what some of those handshakes are anymore. I totally agree with you. I think the lack of social interaction has developed into individuals not understanding how to deal with adversity. You're talking about bullies. A lot of people don't know how to deal with that. It's never pleasant. I actually was bullied a lot when I was younger. And it sucked, right? No one likes that. But it also teaches you what life is going to be like. And nowadays, everything is painted to be this rosy kind of thing. And we self-learn this by being on social media, by going on Google and looking at things that we would never have been able to see before. So we're able to, in a way, have these experiences without actually having them. And that's detrimental because going somewhere is not the same as watching a YouTube video of someone going on vacation. It's not the same. It can't be duplicated. And that's what you have a lot now. So you have a lot of folks that just don't know how to deal with any of those things because they've self-actualized into thinking, I've already done this before, but they don't. And it leads up to what you're talking about. Social etiquette. No one knows how to do anything. There was a large issue with, during the pandemic, we had a large issue with hygiene, if you will. People had a difficult time with all the different restrictions. But if you really think about it, social etiquette really would tell you before there was a pandemic, if you had to cough, you covered your mouth. If you had to sneeze, you turned away. these are the simple things. It shouldn't be an issue now with all the current health issues. It's just about social good etiquette. And from shaking hands and to all the other stuff, I think we've lost sight of how to interact with one another in those kinds of ways. I don't think everyone should have to do a certain thing, but, it doesn't hurt to be nice.
I've seen where, like you were talking about going on vacation, seeing a trip to Cancun on YouTube, and then going there in real life, it's not the same thing. You can actually translate that to so many of the other problems that we all face in life. And it's like, if I only show you the good things, you're going to think everything has to be that way when you're young. Because when we're young, we don't know this until we get older, but our minds really haven't developed in the teenage years to really understand all the emotional stuff. We just can't process it. I told somebody, I think, that if I were to go back in time now, being in my late 30s, and told my 18-year-old self, don't do this, this, or this, I just would have flipped myself off, because it's not that I don't think that person would be telling me the right stuff. I couldn't literally not process it through my mind. I'm still thinking one way, and the mind hasn't developed to actually be able to interpret that. And that's what we just call life experience. As you get older, you just know, you start to figure it out. But telling that to a young person, even if you're telling them everything right, it can't process it through no fault of their own. That's just biology and evolution. And it does take you going through the motions, learning how to do social skills in order to actually become a better person. But you don't see that at that age. I didn't see it at that age. I would have never thought that learning how to, for example, clean my room would lead to organization skills that would help me in a job or on my own. You can't put that together.
No.
So it's definitely something that I think that, as much as social media has been a great thing with connecting everybody, there are the other sides of it that either we just don't talk about or we overlook. And going back to the relationship part there, when we were younger and we're trying to find somebody to interact with and build up our dating skills and whatnot, it kind of used to be when you got in a relationship that, you, for long-term relationships, you've helped each other grow. You were good at one thing, the other person was good at something else, and you can help each other out to grow. Ideally, it would have been to raise a family. You have your good points, I have my good points, together we make something good. But, I think one of the other challenges with it is I've seen a lot of people grow up. They may be expected to do one thing, but they're taught the other side, which is not bad. But now they go through life just thinking about the other side, forgetting that you still have expectations to do over here, but you never learn them. An example this is actually a recent example. So we just came back from Hawaii, and we have a dog, and my mom offered to dog sit with my dog, and I thought everything would be okay. I can't predict the future on so many other things, but problems came up through nobody's fault.
Sure.
Dog had to go to the hospital. We tried to arrange it virtually. We're 3,000 miles away. There's only so much that we can do. So we were trying to make it work. In the meantime, of course, my mom's going through everything that she has to experience with, not just that, but also what she sees going to the veterinary clinic, and other dogs that are experiencing certain things. And it's an emotional toll. I can only imagine that. And I started thinking about how my mind actually processes that. And I'm very, I guess like a lot of mostly guys, we're very analytical. It's very much, if there's a problem, how do I solve that problem? Okay, the building's on fire. What do I got to do? I got to evacuate people. We got to get water over here. We got to confine the area. We got to contain it this here. Once the fire's out, we got to, get the damage control in. We got to knock down the building, clear it out. We're very analytical that way. But in the process of that, we miss the fact that somebody lost a home, or somebody lost a life, or somebody, there's other things that are happening there, like the emotional side of it. It does not come to me naturally. So in my example here, while I was thinking very analytical about what needed to get done finances and doctor's appointments and care and all that good stuff, I was not thinking about the other side, about the emotional toll.
Right.
And it's something that, the more I've gone through life, the more I realize I'm expected to do certain things because that's just what I'm supposed to do. If someone breaks into my home, I'm expected to take care of that.
Sure.
I'm not going to go hide under the bed and say, hey, honey, you go deal with that burglar who's in our home
Right.
now. I'm expected to do certain things and I react that way, but I easily forget the other side of the coin. And that's where being in a relationship where somebody who's more in touch with that can help balance me out and help get me to see the other side of the coin that I otherwise normally would never have wanted to. If I was single, I would just take care of everything analytical and say, okay, the problems are solved, we're all good, everybody's happy. I don't see the other emotional side of it. But what I'm seeing with like a lot of younger kids growing up is like a lot of young boys is that they're getting a lot of the exposure about the other side of the coin, but we're not teaching them the skills that they need to go out and do in the world, how to address conflict, how to manage money, how to provide resources, how to do all the things that your father's kind of supposed to teach you. We teach you a lot of the other side, which is not bad, but you got to get the fundamentals down first. So with like my example, I was so focused on the fundamentals about what needed to get done that I missed the other side, which is where having a strong partner helps you out.
Sure.
But I see a lot of young people who don't see it that way.
Well, I think a lot of the younger generation just aren't exposed to the things that we were exposed to. So the things that they know aren't the same. And I think it's universal. It's the lack of being able to do just the simple things, balancing a checkbook, although that's not as important anymore because no one really uses checks. But being able to budget your finances, that's along the same lines. Simple things, applying for a credit card, getting credit, buying your first car, all these types of things. There's a lot of lack of understanding of how it works. And a lot of it is the ease of which we can do things. Like buying a car, you literally can actually go on your phone right now and buy a car and have it delivered to you, which I think is just weird. But it really takes away from the knowledge that the younger generation needs to know. My nephew is actually a good example. I think he just recently went to college. I think he's a couple years in now. But I remember my brother telling me about his first foray into using a credit card. He wasn't thinking too much about, actually he didn't think at all about the cost of what he was purchasing. He just purchased. And of course at that time, the credit card was linked to his parents. So they looked and they're like, what are you spending all this on? And he's all like, well, I have money. And they're like, well, that's not how you spend it. And he needed that kind of like speaking to and understanding of what was happening. He got it right away, but it's funny because we take for granted, yeah, well, you don't spend money you don't have, you don't do those kinds of things, but we really don't teach that. It's not really taught in any classes in high school at all. Some of the most basic things aren't taught. And then you're also talking outside of finance and whatnot, just simple physical things. Does anyone even know how to change a tire anymore?
Oh, don't even start on that one.
Does anyone know how to do anything with a power tool where you won't actually end up taking a finger off? Does anyone even know how to put together a barbecue? Like if I asked any younger person, like if you're not experienced in that, like let's say you didn't spend a lot of time cooking. Obviously anyone who does would know how, but I'm like, all right, we're going to go to a picnic. Set up the barbecue. Granted, I didn't know how to do that either at that age. But all these things are lost. And I think it's just going to get more clearer that that's kind of where we're headed. Less knowledge, more opinions.
I mean, something as simple as changing a tire, and there's some, I got to be careful how I say this, but let's just say that I came across somebody who was changing, they weren't changing a tire, they were working on their vehicle in their parking lot or their parking stall, whatever it is. And They did not know where to put the jack to get the car up. So what they did was they took one of the tires off. Okay, at least you got that part off. Laid it flat down, put it underneath the rear of the vehicle near the gas tank. Okay. What they then did was took a 30 pack of cans, we'll say that, something you'd buy at the grocery store or the local liquor store, put that underneath the driver's rocker panel and jack up the vehicle to work underneath it. They didn't put the jack in the right place. So the jack failed. So the car landed on top of a 30 pack of cans and a wheel.
Wait, is this a spare wheel? Like, how'd they get the wheel?
I don't know.
Like, was the wheel actually already on the car and they took it off and they put it underneath it?
They put it underneath the car.
How'd they get the wheel off?
I don't know. I don't know. This is what I, walking by and I see this. So the person underneath needs to get out, obviously. So somebody, Good Samaritan, goes to their car and they get a scissor jack. You know those cheap jacks you get when you buy a car.
Most cars have them.
Yes. Here's the thing. They didn't know how to use it.
Sure.
They
Some
said,
of them
okay,
are complicated.
I got a jack. What do I do? They give it to the guy underneath. And in the meantime, here I am. I come out and see what's actually going on. And I see what's going on. I don't see the cans on the other side. That's a whole separate story. But I go there. I try to help the guy by getting him out. And he's got the scissor jack underneath, and he's trying to jack the car up under the gas tank again, which is a big no-no. Just thinking about all that gas leaking out. You're supporting the car somewhere it's not supposed to be. So I tell him, give me the jack. He finally does. I put the jack where it's supposed to be. And
Wait, this guy's still underneath the car?
He's still underneath the car. So I help him up. He gets out. Okay, he's fine. No injuries. Luckily, the paramedics showed up. They took care of him and all that good stuff. And you don't want to put that to embarrass anybody, because I get some people in some places that's just what you grow up with. But the point of that story was, here's somebody who's a good Samaritan helping out, but they don't know how to use a jack.
All right.
Which is like, if you're stuck on the side of the road somewhere and your car breaks down, you have a jack. What are you going to do with it? Like, even the instructions are right there of where you're supposed to put it, where you're supposed to do it. People get very intimidated by it. And that wasn't something that was a thing when we were growing up. Your fathers just told you, this is how you change a tire. This is how you balance a checkbook. This is how you do these basic things in life that you're expected to, especially if you're the husband in a traditional relationship. These are things you're expected to do. And so many people just don't know how to do the basics, at least, especially young men, that the basics of what I think you're supposed to know, very basic. So many of them don't have. Is there an app for that? Is there an app that I can download that will do it for me? It's right. Like your phone, you're in the middle of Arizona. There's no cell phone reception. You're stuck on the side of the road. What do you do? And it's just like deer in the headlights.
Well, I totally agree as far as the basic skills. I don't think it needs to, we grew up in a time where there was gender norms, right? Like, boys learn how to do this. I think there's a lot of people that are younger now. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. You just need to learn basic things. And I think basic things aren't being learned by all the younger folks. Learning how to change a tire, or just understanding that story that you just told, that is dangerous. That is absolutely dangerous. I'm surprised no one died.
No one died. He didn't get hurt.
But there should be enough. Anyone that comes by, a bystander, should be able to realize, like you and I just realized, like you're telling me this, and I'm flabbergasted. Because if I saw that in real life, I'd be like, you need to come out because someone's going to die. This is not a good situation here. And I think that's the issue. The issue is there's a lot of things that aren't learned. It's assumed that they can just figure it out on the fly. Look it up on Google, or, push this button. And a lot of this is expected to be able to just figure it out on the fly. You can't figure everything out on the fly. You have to know some basic information. And that also goes with what we were talking about earlier, the social etiquette. be able to greet someone, whether it be by shaking a hand, bowing, not, whatever it is. Understand how to greet somebody. The way I greet you is probably going to be different than the way I greet somebody's parents or a dignitary. Know how to do that. I see so many people that are younger that don't know how to do that in the workplace, in the personal life. Know how to do things. There's a lot of things that people just don't know.
There's a lot of, I mean, even not even young people anymore. Some people our age don't even know the basics of that. And
yeah, don't get me started on that.
it's who was I? Was I talking to somebody? Somewhere in Hawaii, I was talking to somebody about how everything's changed since the pandemic, and they were talking about how Hawaii is very popular with a lot of Japanese tourists, but they haven't been able to come over because of all the regulations and restrictions and all that stuff. So sure. A big portion of their tourist industry hasn't come back yet because of that reason, in addition to Hawaii's own protocols that they had at this time of this recording anyway. But one of the things that had happened was that, I guess it was a thing where a lot of younger Japanese couples would come to Hawaii and they would get married there. Sounds cool. I mean, I'd like to get married in Hawaii. It sounds pretty awesome, to tell you the truth.
I agree.
Part of the reason why they did that was because, they could only invite so many people. And compared to if they did the traditional wedding back in Japan, wherever they're from in that country, how things were expected to be done. And that as time has gone on, it used to be where that was what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have like this elaborate wedding, for example. You're supposed to invite these many people. You're supposed to do these traditions and customs because that's what everybody did.
Right.
And how the younger generations are trying to buck that trend now by saying, we want to go somewhere else, go outside, do things a little bit differently. Maybe when we first do it, it's against our parents' wishes because they're very traditional. But we want to kind of set the precedent of what's happening now. Like, this is more for us now. And I was talking to somebody about it, and they were telling me, yeah, even in countries outside the U.S., traditional cultures are changing. Like, it's
right.
starting to not become the way that it had been for hundreds or thousands of years. It's everybody's starting to catch on that things are just different in this world now. We're doing things differently. Getting married later, not getting married, not having kids, not doing the whole traditional ceremony things, because we're in a different world. And, I think we're in a world now where we're valuing a lot more entrepreneurship than we are just home ownership. Because, it used to be owning a home, you were good. Well, not quite as much anymore.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the younger generation right behind us are emphasizing, and I think this is a good thing, is less commodities and more events. So people want to spend more money on something that they experience. A lot of the things that you're talking about, like weddings and whatnot, I'll see people they want to have a wedding where everyone can have an experience that they take with them, as opposed to this is a union between a man and a woman. It's almost contractual the way it was done before. So a lot of people moving away from that. And I think it's really good to be able to have these memories and these events as opposed to, all right, I'm going to amass commodities, get a home, get a car, get these kind of other things. Instead, it's like, let's take this trip to Europe. Let's do these other things. Let's do a group bonding experience where we go to the Grand Canyon with our parents or whatnot. You see a lot of that, and I think that's actually that's a step in the right direction as opposed to before. Especially with us, it's like you were successful if you were able to accumulate material things, from a home to a car, even to a certain extent, a partner, a wife or a husband, right? You have to have these things, and then you're good. Not so much anymore.
We're kind of seeing how, and some people that we know of or have heard of, we've all had friends that grew up and they were like, yeah, mom and dad didn't like each other, talk to each other. There were things going on there that which never happened, but they did what they were supposed to do, and I'm here because of it. But,
right.
I've seen where things can work and where things cannot work, and trying to do it our own way. I think you're seeing a lot more people in Western countries like ours, where they're just, I'm not doing that whole thing now. Or, people's expectations of what they want from me were so much different now than they were for our parents, where, oh, you got a job, oh, you're young enough. Okay, let's make this whole thing work. And it was just done with it. Now it's, for better or for worse, the modern world has influenced how we view things now. And while I don't agree with this, to each their own, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of guys saying, screw this. I don't want to deal with what society tells me I have to do here in this country here. I'm going to go to Southeast Asia and find somebody where, I can get by with less. And, I mean, whatever, you do you.
Right.
You do what you got to do. But it kind of goes back to show where when you take away the more modern countries and you see the rest of the world where most of the people live, a lot of those countries are still very traditional because that's all that they have. If you grow up in India or some parts of China or Africa, there's not much that's expected of you. There's just not a lot out there. So you still, adhere to the traditional roles.
Well, the struggle to survive is still there, right?
Yes, yeah.
Whereas here, it's almost expected. It's to a point where it's kind of annoying, and I find myself doing it as well. Like, you take certain things for granted, and you just expect them to be there. And I think those last 15 months, the pandemic and the quarantine, helped us kind of understand, it's not really that way, and going back to what it was isn't the same. So it's not really what you want, because that's not normal, so to speak. So
right. It's funny you brought that up because that's kind of what my mindset was too. Like, I have a job, I'm committed to that job. I do a great job while I'm there. I do what I got to do. But there's other things that I think I can do for the world, for myself, for everything. Like, just me and you sitting here having a conversation. Like, it's good stuff to get this kind of information out there.
right.
It's unbelievable to think that it's hard for people to do that because you're almost afraid to speak your mind because you're afraid of getting canceled, fired, whatever, because you're just trying to have a legitimate conversation about whatever.
The problem with that, though, is a lot of people nowadays are trying to either tell you what you should be doing, or they're trying to be either right or wrong in what they're saying. Have a conversation. Doesn't have to be about me telling you or me being told. And that's what, and again, this kind of goes back to social etiquette. People don't have a conversation anymore. You can talk about all kinds of things, and you don't have to agree about any of them. But that doesn't mean at the end of the day, if we don't agree, we're going to go outside and kill each other. Mm-hmm. And this is what it's resulted to nowadays. If you don't agree, I hate you. Let's go outside. I'm going to kill you. And it doesn't need to be that way. You can have conversations, and people don't know how to have conversations anymore. Just shooting to shoot.
It used to be, I think one way about something, you completely disagree with me about that same issue, but we can sit here and chit chat. And even if at the end of the conversation, we don't change anybody's minds, at least I understand where you're coming from. You understand where I'm coming from. And that's the basis for us to actually get things done. It's like, I may disagree with you 100% on that topic, but I get why you think that way and why you were raised a certain, whatever it is. Exactly. Right. And I can work with that. Say, we'll agree to disagree, but we're all in this for the same sort of end goal, if you will. And it's kind of like, you can't even do that anymore.
But I also understand some of the challenges too. Conversations can be a lot more acrimonious now because a lot of the information that certain people have, I shouldn't say certain people, a lot of information that people may have when they're engaging into a conversation that ends up being argumentative, it could be completely based on false information, which is not at all verified in any way whatsoever. We've seen it on Instagram. We've seen it on Facebook. My neighbor's cat told me, and now it becomes fact, and you regurgitate that fact and you argue that fact, and it's not. It's just not. And that's what it can be very difficult, because if you're trying to have a conversation, you think you're enlightened, and then someone's coming from a completely unenlightened point of view in your mind, you can't have a non-confrontational conflict or non-confrontational conversation. But you actually can let that person be crazy, if you will. Just keep having the conversation. It's okay. I don't have to be right in what I'm telling you. And if you think that person is wrong, good. you can still have a cordial conversation.
Well, I mean, if the neighbor's cat said so, then I'm guessing
That's what I'm saying.
Oh man, it's crazy to think that we've gotten to that point now where how some of these things start out with, but to each their own. It's something that I hope that people who listen to these type of YouTube channels and content kind of get, is that there is no bias here. There is no I think this way and therefore I'm right. Therefore I talk to people who only think the same way that I do. There's a bigger picture out there. And 98% of the people in this world who are out there just living their life, we're doing our jobs, we're taking care of what we got to take care of. We don't get caught up in the muck. Like, what are they doing every day? How do they view the world? You might see that it's a little bit different than just what mainstream media, what social media, what society tells you, is that there's a bigger picture out there.
Right.
Maybe the more information that people get just from having conversations with normal people like what we're doing now will help to kind of bridge that gap where maybe people can just at the very least start to learn to listen more and be able to.
That's key. That's key. Listen more.
Yeah, take away your predisposed, okay, I know I'm 100% right because there's no way I could be wrong about whatever, but let me listen to you.
Listen anyway.
Exactly. And you'd be shocked how many, and I've caught myself doing that.
We all do that.
I know I'm right about this, whatever it is, and there's no way someone could convince me otherwise, but let me listen. Oh, I never thought about that part. I still think you're wrong, but I never thought about that part.
I think nowadays everyone is in such a rush to interject. Like you start hearing something and you can start seeing physically twitching and like, I have to interject. That's wrong. So what if it's wrong? Let the person speak. And then when they're done, maybe you can have your say. I think you're right. Just listen.
Yeah, exactly, man. Well, I've killed my entire can of Truly. How about you? Did you even get to it?
No, but I finished what was
All right.
in here.
Oh, man. Well, this has been awesome, man. I like this, man. This is cool, just sitting down talking to somebody. And I haven't talked to you in a year and a half, and you're always someone that's really awesome to have a conversation with because I never know what I'm going to learn.
I appreciate that.
I never know what you come across in your normal career, especially what you do for a living, the things that you see and interact with on a daily basis as a paralegal, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so I can only imagine, having the expectations that that come upon you, the casework that you see every day, and it's a lot to process. So you see another side of the coin that maybe doesn't get out there enough. So it's awesome to have these sit downs with you, and we gotta do it again.
Absolutely.
I think this has been awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me over.
All right, thank you, Ellison Lee, and cheers.
Cheers. Thanks,
right.
Mike.
Thank you. Everybody have a good one. Yeah, this was pretty helpful.